Hello, listeners, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Divine Dialogue podcast. I will be your host, Jess, and I'll be taking you through stories, mostly through movies, to reveal what I find to be really wise lessons, spiritual nuggets, and deeper meanings that we can carry with us throughout our lives. I think we can look at certain critical points in our lives and almost always find a story that relates to them. I know I definitely can. So if you are here for depth, meaning, reflection, and an exploration of stories, then this is the podcast for you. I also wanted to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. I am 36 and I live in Arizona in the United States. I have always been fascinated by stories ever since I was very little. My first love, actually, was the story of Cinderella. My mom had one of those big picture storybooks, the kinds that you would see someone sitting in like a nice lazy boy rocking chair by a fire. And I made my mom read it to me every single night. And when I was 3 years old, I could tell if she skipped even one word. I couldn't read yet, but I had heard it so many times that I had memorized it. So stories have always meant something to me. They've always stayed with me. They've always resonated. And Cinderella will definitely be one I go over later. It is not on the immediate docket, but we will absolutely get there eventually. For now, I'm starting with a movie that is not necessarily a massive blockbuster, but it has been close to my heart since I was very young. The animated film Balto, which came out in 1995. It's a pretty short film, only about 75 minutes, but there is so much in it. There are going to be 4 episodes in this Balto series, and this is episode 1, along with the intro of this podcast. And before we go into the first scene, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast, what the plan is, and also what you can expect from the structure of each episode, while still leaving room for that structure to change. I've been in the process of making this for quite a while. It was one of those things where you have an idea, then you sit on the idea, then you ruminate over the idea, you put the idea back on the shelf, you think about it some more, then you kind of freak out about where to start, how it's all going to play out, and whether you need to have the whole map before you take the journey. And I've been more at peace lately with not having the whole map. I can just take the journey and figure it out as I go. So I wanted to go ahead and start. I've written several drafts for other movies, and after Balto, I plan on going into the first of the Harry Potter movies. But I will not be staying on Harry Potter exclusively. I'll be jumping around to different films and different kinds of stories, and I'll make my way back to Harry Potter as it feels inspiring to do so. This podcast will cover all sorts of movies. Some dark, some uplifting, some serious, some nostalgic, some a mix of these. There's going to be quite a variety on Divine Dialogue, so if that interests you, I encourage you to subscribe to the show and stick around. I also want to give you a loose idea of how these episodes are going to flow. For the most part, I plan on looking at one scene per episode. If there are a few scenes that are really short and belong together, I may bundle them. But for right now, the plan is to take it one scene at a time. I may also choose to explore themes at some point and make longer episodes based on a sequencing of scenes and point out things that I see as main flow points of a story. But if it's a scene I'm going over, I'll start by recapping the scene and laying the groundwork, just so we're all on the same page. Then I'll move into what I'm calling the soul meaning of the scene, the deeper layer, the lesson, essentially the divine dialogue part of the podcast, the symbolism, and the part underneath the surface. For any astrology nerds out there, this is kind of the 12th house unseen part of the story. I have a stellium in my 12th house, and I honestly think that is part of why stories have always resonated with me on such a deep level. I tend to notice the symbolism, the hidden meaning, the emotional undercurrent, the thing behind the thing, essentially. So that will really guide the soul meaning section of the podcast. After that, I'll usually move into a personal mirror, where I talk about my own life and how I relate to the scene, what it brings up in me, what it reflects back to me, what wounds, patterns, longings, or lessons I see in it. And my hope is that, as I do this, you may be able to relate to it too. Maybe you'll see where that scene applies to your own life, or where that lesson is showing up for you in a different form. Then I'll offer up a divine dialogue question, or maybe a handful of questions. I may expand on them a little bit, and if it feels right for the flow of the episode, I may answer them myself as well. and then I'll close out the episode. So that is the loose structure. A scene recap, a soul meaning, a personal mirror, divine dialogue questions, and closing reflections. But I do want to emphasize the word loose. This is going to be malleable depending on the story, the scene, and what feels alive in the moment. I don't want this podcast to feel overly scripted, except for this intro. I will write out drafts and read from them loosely as a guide, mostly so I make sure I touch on everything I want to say, but I don't want it to sound robotic or rigid like I'm reading from a teleprompter. I want this to feel warm, inviting, and rhythmic, not rigid, not overly structured. Because I think some of the magic in this is going to come from on-the-spot inspiration, and I want to stay open to that. Normally, I'm the type of person who likes to have a plan for everything, but with this, I want to lean more into a flow state. So I'll loosely apply the structure, but I'm also going to let the story breathe. As of right now, there are not going to be any fancy bells and whistles, no sound effects, no ads, except for whatever the platform decides to put there, I guess. Nothing super impressive production-wise. For now, I'm just here in my home office, speaking the raw truth from my heart as I see it, and sharing what these stories mean to me. And my hope is that they can mean something to you too. For now, I plan on releasing 1 episode a week, and we'll see how that goes. I may surprise you with special episodes on certain movie anniversaries or seasonal episodes that match the time of year we're in. We'll kind of just see what happens and where inspiration takes me. And without further ado, I would like to begin the first episode of the Balto series. And I want to begin by offering a dedication of this episode to my newly made friend, Kim. She is incredibly inspirational. She is also a content creator, and I've linked her channel in the show notes of this episode. She is a big reason why I felt inspired enough to finally launch this. So Kim, if you're listening, thank you so much for everything that you do. It has been really great getting to know you. And thank you to anyone still sticking around and listening. With that, let's begin episode 1 of Balto. So the title of this episode is Balto Rejected by the Town. So at this point in the movie, we've learned, or we've seen, basically it starts with a older woman talking to her granddaughter, and the granddaughter has this dog, and she's explaining that there's races being held to determine the fastest sled teams. And the scene that I'm going to jump into is a little bit into the race. So they're racing and they're about to come back to like the town area. And Rosie is now in animated form as a little girl. So she's telling the story as an older woman. And we see that at the end of the movie, but she's a little girl in this part of the movie. And she has a dog named Jenna. And she just got a new sled from her parents, and she's like excited, and they're watching the end of the race, and she takes her little musher's hat off and waves it, and it flies through the air and lands in the middle of, the racetrack where the dogs are going to trample over it. And Balto is watching both Jenna and the race because he really likes Jenna a lot. Apologies if you can hear my cat in the background. She just wants to participate in the podcast too. And that's totally fine. So anyway, Balto sees Jenna, and he's also watching the race, but then he sees the hat fly right into the middle of the race path. And Jenna, because Rosie wants to go, grab it, so Jenna pulls Rosie back by like her coat with her teeth, and Balto springs into action. He looks at the hat, looks back at the dogs coming up on the track, and he's able to pass up all the sled dogs, and he rescues the hat before it's trampled on. And Rosie expresses genuine gratitude by inviting Balto to join her mush team with her, new little sled that she has. But her father kicks snow at Balto and tells her not to reach for him because he's part wolf and he might bite her. And Balto walks away with his ears down, his tail between his legs, like he's real defeated and hurt. And so essentially that's the recap of the scene. The sole meaning of the scene is we do see Balto on the sidelines. And it's important because he's not on the sidelines out of fear. Balto's actually very brave. He's just on the sidelines out of what I would call positional necessity, meaning he knows he's not welcome on the team because of prejudice and ignorance, and he doesn't push or fight his way to acceptance. He just watches. But when something risks harming the pure spirit of that little girl, A brief exception opens and he saves her hat. I also do think it was instinctual on his part. We're going to talk a lot about energy on this podcast, but he likes Jenna. Like, he really, really likes Jenna. And Balto is, an example of divine masculine energy, and Jenna's definitely divine feminine energy, and those energies really are drawn to each other. So he, I think, also wanted to impress Jenna a little bit. It was both to protect Rosie and to impress the, girl dog that he likes. So that was a window of opportunity for the town to change their stance on Balto, but it was closed very quickly, because they just automatically don't trust him, no matter how good his intentions are. It's very important to note that no manipulation was required for them to kick snow at him and, tell him to go away. Manipulation does come in a later scene when Steel steps on Balto's paw to make him growl a little bit and reinforce the idea that the town already didn't trust him. But here Balto is defeated because no one in the town, really except for Jenna and Rosie, accepts him. He does have his sidekicks. He's got Boris, the goose, and Muck and Luck, the polar bears who can't swim. They're kind of like comic relief and silly sidekicks, but he doesn't have any members of the town, any people that accept him. And immediately after this, we do see Balto with a pack of wolves off in the distance. They howl to him as if they recognize and love this wild part of him that is banished from the town, like the wolf, but he doesn't respond. He doesn't howl back because the town and his own shame about himself have silenced his own call, basically. His voice is temporarily muted. He doesn't feel like he can embrace the wolf side of him. He, I feel like, tries hard to lean into his dog side because he knows that that's accepted, but the people know because he's got bigger paws, he's bigger stature, he's got a wildness about him that can't be hidden, even though he tries to downplay that part of him and, lean into his dog part. So that's essentially the sole meaning of the scene. And then for a personal mirror, Balto is such a mirroring story because he shows us the pain of having to turn away from part of who you are. We all have a wolf part that is a little wild and untamed, and I think refuses to be silenced or regulated to a second-class status for the comfort of the world. And in my case, I will say this was definitely my sexual orientation back when I was in my late teens and early 20s. I was raised in a very, what you would say is a dog-like environment. Obedience to religion, rules, restrictions, and right and wrong. So the wolf part of me was not welcomed well at all, especially at first. This softened over time, but like Balto, I would, feel the shame from other people, the defeat, the fear that there was, something about me that just wasn't acceptable, because why else would a reaction like that happen? But I came to realize, just like Balto does, that it wasn't about me. It was about them not having a framework for all of who I was, or even seeing it as dangerous. And it was seen as dangerous because their worldview couldn't put a box on it, it couldn't make sense of it. And that's what we see in, this Alaskan town, is they can't make sense of him. They can't really put him in a box. He's neither wolf nor dog. He's a mix, and they don't have a label for that they're comfortable with. So Balto has to learn to basically integrate the two parts. That's kind of the theme of the entire movie, is he has to take his dog part and his wolf part and find a way that they can balance each other. Because if he doesn't figure that out, then he really can't feel at peace with himself. So that's essentially what he spends the movie trying to do. He just figures out how to integrate his dog part, his wolf part, and that is how he's able to, solve the plot of the story, basically, which, as you know, is getting the medicine to the town. So that's essential for him to figure that out. And I guess the divine question that comes up for me is, what wolf within you have you been denying that wants to be integrated? And I will say, for me, in addition to the orientation piece, this podcast is part of the wolf in me. It's been calling me for quite a long time. It's something that I've worked on. Like, I've written quite a bit for it over probably years at this point. Because I study stories and I've always studied stories. But I, had these thoughts like, well, what if no one listens? Or what if people hate it? Or what if it doesn't take off or get any traction? And what's the point? And sometimes you get lost in the dog only energy. Like, well, I'll just be a dog. I don't need to embrace my wolf. I don't need to follow the calling. But there's something really beautiful about following it. Even if you don't get, the reaction you might want as quickly as you want it, it's still fulfilling for yourself, because there's something very, true about it, and it resonates. And for me, like, when I'm working on these drafts and kind of going through with a fine-tooth comb, like, these stories and finding all these nuggets of inspiration, it's very inspiring and uplifting to write about it, and then to speak about it and share it. And even if I just get a small audience out of this, like, that would be amazing, just to share, what these stories have meant to me and how much they've helped me in my life, because I kind of find them akin to what some people would say they find in religion. I'm not religious. I was raised Christian, but I don't follow that anymore. I've always found a lot more beauty in stories because they're not corrupted. I think that religion has a lot of power structure and a lot of manipulation, a lot of rigidity, that I think stories are much more of a flow. And they don't require you to believe a certain way. They're very open for interpretation, and they meet you kind of where you are. Because the thing for me is, when I watch these stories, my interpretation of them shifts, and yet it's the same story. They say the same things, the scenes are the same, characters are the same, but my interpretation changes because my position in life changes. And I think that that's the beauty of stories, is that as you grow and as you shift and as you change, your perception of them changes, and you can always go to deeper levels, and you can be like, well, at this point in my life, this meant this to me, and now this movie means something completely different. But they're both equally holy, because they both contributed to your journey of where you are now. So I think it's very important that you pursue whatever that wolf calling is and integrate it, because it will help you see things that you couldn't see before. If you just stay only in your dog state and you never find your wolf state, you won't integrate everything that you need to. And I also think it's important to remember, when thinking about this question, what wolf within you have you been denying that wants to be integrated? That the lesson in Balto is not to hold the wolf part higher than the dog part, or vice versa. It's all about integration. They're both parts of you, and they need to be integrated and balanced and layered in a way that the whole of you can shine through. Because there's going to be times where you need to be both. And whatever else you are, you are. Like, I think people make a big mistake a lot of the time of shaming and degrading and silencing and banishing parts of them. And then they, wonder why, like, they feel so heavy and their energy is imbalanced, and they don't have, like a stable perspective. Because if you, like, ban parts of you, they don't go away. They just go underground. And you need to integrate them. It's very, very essential. So I think I'll go ahead and leave it there with scene 1 of Balto, as well as the intro to this podcast. So for my next episode, I plan on going into the scene where Balto shows Jenna the Northern Lights, and essentially teaches us how to find beauty in the brokenness. And I'm also going to talk about how the Northern Lights is not just that scene of it being like a romantic outing between them. It's also a very crucial theme in essentially Balto discovering who he really is. Because the Northern Lights are, yes, obviously beautiful, but also directional for him. So I'm going to go into kind of the depth of that. And if you did enjoy this, please subscribe, and please also definitely check out my friend Kim's stuff. If you're into stories and depth, her channel would be great. I've put both of her channel links in the show notes. And once again, Kim, thank you so much for being such an inspiration to help me launch this. I really do appreciate the creative connection we've shared so far, and it's been absolutely a pleasure getting to know you. So thank you, divine listeners, for tuning in. And I plan on releasing episodes at least once a week. It might vary on the day, but that's my goal, is to do once a week and kind of give you a preview of what the next episode will be. And then once we finish a series, talk about the next series. So Balto will be 4 episodes. I believe. I don't think there's going to be more, at least not for now. And then after Balto, we'll go into the first Harry Potter. So that's the plan for right now. But I do invite you, if you have story suggestions. Mostly I go through movies, some TV shows. There might be some games here and there too. But please definitely don't be shy about, sending them to me. I do have my podcast email that I use only for business inquiries for this show in the show notes as well. So if you have any suggestions, please send them my way. And until next time, divine listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Divine Dialogue podcast, and I will catch you on the next one. All right. Bye for now.